I hope you can hear me now. As I was saying, declarations just defines the properties and methods. That's why when we access an object in TypeScript and we are using a library written in JavaScript, we have all the methods and properties of that library. It's because of the declaration files. Developer experience. One reason to use TypeScript is because of the developer experience. So types prevent bugs, first of all. If we, for some reason, we misspelled writing a method, or we are passing a wrong type to a function, if we compile this code, we automatically get some errors by the compiler. So we don't have this kind of errors in runtime, which is nice, and it can save us a lot of time. Refactoring code. It's much easier using TypeScript to refactor code. Basically, we are renaming a property in an interface, so it will find all reference to that type, and it will change in all places where we are using that property. Pretty nice. IntelliSense. So as I said before, when we access an object, we get all properties and methods of that object using the declarations. So it's pretty useful, and it increases the developer productivity. Okay, now let's talk about migration. So now that we know the basics of JavaScript and the advantages, let's migrate from JavaScript to TypeScript. So our migration goal. Basically, we have a really simple API written in JavaScript. It's using API as a web framework. And our goal is to migrate to TypeScript. Here is a project, if you can check later. So what is our migration plan? So first we start by installing TypeScript. We install as a dev dependency. Then we install declarations. In this case, we install the Node declarations and the API. So since we are in the Node environment, we need to install the declarations for Node, and also declarations for API, that is a web framework written in JavaScript. Then we set up our tsconfig.json. So instead of passing all compiler options via argument, we can initialize this tsconfig.json, and we can specify all the compiler options. It's much easier. Then we enable this option, allow.js, that basically says to the TypeScript compiler, well, you compile TypeScript, and now you will also compile JavaScript code. And then optionally, we can enable this option, check.js. So instead of just copying the JavaScript code, it will also analyze the JavaScript and report some errors. How? Using JS docs and declaration files. I will show you. Then we just start renaming our JS files to TypeScript, fix errors, and then go back to step 4 until we migrate the whole application. Now let's do a simple demo. So can you see my screen? Cool. So here is the package.json, and as you can see, we just have API as a dependency, and as dev dependencies, I have API, Node declarations, and TypeScript. Then I just created a few scripts to help me building the code. So let's migrate our first file. Let's migrate our server. So we just go here. We just rename the file to TypeScript, and that's it. Let's compile this. Okay, it's running the tsc command, the TypeScript compiler, and as you can see, it generates to our output directory the JavaScript code. But as you can see, it's missing the other JavaScript files. So this is the TypeScript file that was compiled. So let's also, instead of export as a la JavaScript, we are using export a la TypeScript. So to enable compiling the JavaScript code, we need to enable this option. So there's like a bunch of compiler options, and we are enabling this one, allow.js. So when we enable this option, Now the compiler, it looks at the TypeScript files and also to the JavaScript. So here we have our JavaScript code also. So we have our TypeScript that was compiled in our JavaScript. And it basically just copied the file and do some kind of indentation. So nothing special. So let's try to run this. npm start. So our server is running. Then let's curl our server, and it's returning some stuff. So it's working. So as you can see, we have well, some TypeScript code and some JavaScript. But let's make things more interesting. So now that we are using a TypeScript compiler, I want to take the full advantages, and I'm going to enable this option, check.js. So instead of just compile the JavaScript, it will also analyze the JavaScript code and report some errors. Well, let's just clear this, and if I compile, okay, yeah, we have errors. So I don't know if you can see it, but basically it's saying that type number is not assignable to Boolean in a JavaScript file. So if we go here, it's complaining that it's expecting a Boolean and we are passing a number. And how TypeScript knows this? Because of the GS docs. If we go to the GS docs here, it says that insert is expecting a task, and the task, the done property, is a Boolean, and we are passing a number. So we can define types in JS doc using this notation, and it's pretty useful. So let's fix this. So now we pass a Boolean. So, and it was reporting another error here in this file, saying that we are passing a string and we expect a number. And this code, at first, it looks that is correct. Well, we just receive a request, we get the param ID, and then we access the database. The thing is, if we go to the get method, in the GS docs, it says that we are expecting a number, and you are passing a string. And how it knows that params is a string? Because of the declarations. So the TypeScript uses the declaration, the happy declarations, and it knows that params is a dictionary of strings. That's why ID is a string. And here we can see the all definitions of the request object in App.js. So let's just convert our variable to a number. And if we try to compile this, well, no errors. Cool. We just fixed 2 errors in our JavaScript using TypeScript, which is great. So let's just migrate another file. Well, now we are receiving an error. So as you can see, we don't have IntelliSense here. So, but if we had types, we are saying that we are receiving an error. Now we have all properties of the error method, error object. So let's just print the message, and let's make things even more interesting. So let's enable more options in our compiler. So there is a bunch of type checking options here. We are going to enable all of them. So if we enable this, now we are saying to the compiler, so if we have like unused local variables or unused parameters, please report errors. And this is true for our JavaScript code and also for our TypeScript code. So let's try to compile this again. Okay, found some errors. So here it's saying that object is possibly undefined. Well, this one is hard. So why? Because task can be of type task or undefined. Why? Because here in the get method, in the GSDocs, it says that it can return a task or an undefined. And since we enabled this option here, strict null checks, it says that, well, task can be null, so we can have a problem here. Let's protect against this problem. So we need to just check if task is null. Well, cool. We catch another problem, and we can just slowly migrate the whole application from JavaScript to TypeScript. And so we can have people in our team implementing new features in TypeScript and still fixing some problems in JavaScript. We don't need to migrate at once. We can just smoothly migrate our applications. Let's back to the slides. So let's just recap. So convert JavaScript files to TypeScript and enable allow.js to also compile the JavaScript code. Optionally, we can enable this option, check.js. It's very useful. And take advantages of the GSDoc and declarations to also report errors in our JavaScript code. So, and these allow us to use TypeScript, but not write TypeScript. We can just have a whole application written in JavaScript and having type checking if we enable this option and if we install the declarations. So we can write JavaScript with types. Then if we want to catch even more errors in our code, we can enable the strict type checking options to detect even more problems. So, and that's it. Thank you. I don't know if we have time for questions.
Just check type check that we mentioned at the end.
Mm-hmm.
Why aren't they enabled by default?
They are not enabled by default.
So why is
Well, it's like a TypeScript decision. When we generate the TS config file, basically you have all options, and all of them are basically commented. So you just need to uncomment all options. There are some rules that we can catch with linters, but if we just use TypeScript, it's much easier.